The Marvelous Misadventures of Captain and Mateo. The Wolves of Wintergreen by Erebus Esprit. The town of Wintergreen did not live up to its name. Snow blanketed the streets, bent branches low beneath its weight. It caught the glow of torches and lanterns, reflecting orange glimmers out into the old night. Few souls were brave enough to trudge through the mess. Most either stayed home, where hearths flared high against the bite of winter, or stayed at the tavern, where drinks and spirits were raised in equal measures. Captain pushed his way through a snowbank, face wrapped tightly against the whipping wind. Snow clung to his exposed fur in frozen clumps. The township loomed ahead of him. Warm houses of wood and stone promised succor and gentle hearths. But it was a siren's song. The people here were like the people everywhere else, and everywhere else, people held nothing but disdain for Cainids. Most did not even know what he was, mistaking him for a lichen. But Captain was neither ravenous nor entirely lupine. If lichens were wild wolves that dog the limits of civilization, Captain was the domesticated product, bred for purpose, trained for war. 2 guards huddled next to a brazier, warming numb fingers behind tanned leather gloves. A half-empty jug of wine sat in the drift next to them, gently frosting in the night air. The guards didn't react as Captain approached. They were entirely absorbed in their conversation, far too distracted to see a lone traveler. Had they been soldiers under Captain's command, the dereliction in duty would have resulted in double shifts and docked food. A lax watch got people killed. There was nothing more dangerous in a defense. As it stood, however, it was one less roadblock between him and warmth. The tavern loomed ahead of him, bright against the snow. Loud music and louder voices could be heard from down the road. It seemed half the village was gathered there, despite dawn being not far away. More than half, if the smell was anything to go by. It was a dangerous place for Captain to be, but the night was cold, and it had been too long since he'd had a fire and a bed. The chances of him getting to that point without issue were practically non-existent, but the allure of a night with even small creature comfort was infinitely preferable to another night hiding in someone's barn, waiting to be chased out the following morning. Captain had lost track of how many would-be monster hunters had chased him out of the village, brandishing pitchforks, torches, and half-remembered verses from whatever patron religion was unlucky enough to be bastardized in the region. The door stood in front of Captain. The noise on the other end was near deafening, compared to the smothered silence of snow he'd grown used to. Scents washed out from the building. Cooked meat, unwashed people, strong ale. Lots of leather. Captain's nose wrinkled. It smelled like a war camp, and that was nothing Captain wanted to remember. He pushed his way inside and stamped the snow off his boots. The blast of heat from inside was like a loving embrace, fueled by no less than 3 roaring fireplaces. Some of the patrons glanced his way, but he was still bundled tight from outside and had yet to drop his hood. To the rest, he would appear as a traveler, just like any other. It would take a closer look to see the oddities of his appearance, the different bend of his ankles, the dark fur that covered his entire body, the protrusion of his snout. Captain pushed his way through the throng toward the bar. A big fellow was behind it, green-skinned with a piggish face, 2 massive tusks poking up from his bottom lip. A half-orc. Perhaps a bit more than half by the look of him. A good sign. Perhaps the village would be a bit more open to those with non-standard appearances. Judging by some of the suspicious looks being thrown his way, however, it wasn't wise to hope much. The half-orc barman looked Captain up and down as he reached the counter, eyes drawn to a squint. His hand rested easily on the wood, but Captain saw the twitch of his fingers, the glance towards some concealed weapon under the bar. Not that the barman could be blamed, of course. Strangers were rare in villages like this, and Captain's covered appearance was not likely to garner him any sympathies. "What can I get you, traveler?" Despite his size and gruff appearance, the half-orc was surprisingly mellow, an amicable sort, the kind of voice that patrons would confess to after a pint or 3. Too amicable, in fact. It put Captain on edge. Open hostility was, at least, honest. False friendliness was much more likely to end with a dagger flying in his direction. Just a room for the night. Perhaps a meal if the stew pot's hot. The half-orc nodded, eyes never leaving Captain. That can be arranged. 5 silvers for the room, another 3 coppers for dinner. Expensive, for what it was, but not unreasonably so. Captain reached for his coin pouch slowly, well aware he was being watched from multiple directions. There was no hiding the huge sword slung across his back, after all, and that was bound to make people even more nervous than his appearance. Before he had even put his hand on metal, the half-orc leaned in. One more thing, friend. I don't rent to those I don't know. Liabilities and all. Drop your face cover and we can do business. Captain placed a single gold coin on the counter and slid it forward with a gloved fingertip. This is the only face that matters. Consider the extra liability insurance. The half-orc picked up the coin, bit it, then tucked it away in his apron. From below the counter, he produced a key. Right then, a pretty face you have indeed. The room is yours. Up the stairs, last on the right. Girl will be along with your stew in a while. Captain took the key and moved away. A pair of sturdy men, farmers by the look of their hands, stood by the end of the bar, blocking his way. To go around would bring him into the crowd again, a throng of tightly pressed drinkers and dancers, courtesy of the bard at the far end of the room playing a lively tune on the lute. The 2 men stared Captain down, as if daring him to move through them. Do you 2 need something? Don't like strangers round here. Times are tough and strangers mean trouble. You're not looking to start trouble, are you? No. Then you'd best be on your way, stranger. And I will be. Tomorrow morning, after a night's rest and a meal. One of the men shifted his stance, letting his coat spread open to reveal the handle of a cudgel hanging from his belt. Not a guard's beating stick, but a thick piece of wood that had, no doubt, sent quite a few animals packing in its day. Though the farmer's hand didn't stray toward it, the threat was clear. Get you gone. You're not welcome. The song wrapped up to a smattering of applause. The bard hopped down from his little stage at the far end of the room and shoved his way through the crowd, ending up at the bar between Captain and the 2 farmers. Roger! A bottle of your finest Lanothian red, if you would. The half-orc barkeep gave a long-suffering sigh and turned toward the bard. For the last time, we don't carry wine. Ale or mead is all we have. 2 bottles of each, then, for my friends here. They can take their pick, and we'll all be on our merry ways. Captain felt the slightest shift of air around the bard. The scent changed, filling his nose with artificial flowers. On the other side, the 2 farmers glanced at each other, shrugged, then took their steins of ale and left. The bard turned toward Captain with an easy smile, holding out a mug of mead. Pay them no mind, friend. The people here have been on edge lately. One harsh season and they jump at every passing shadow. Your striking appearance doesn't do much to set their hearts at ease. The bard gave a loud whistle, cutting through the noise of the crowd to get the bartender's attention, then held up 2 fingers and pointed toward an unoccupied corner table. The half-orc rolled his eyes and started pouring 2 more drinks. On me, friend. Come, let us talk a while. I'm not here to talk. I just want to rest my head for the night. The words were true enough, but Captain found himself sitting at the table anyway. He suppressed the sudden urge to growl. Bards were infamous for their powers of suggestion, and this one seemed like the type to prove the rule. Nonsense. Indulge me a moment. It's not often we get outsiders. Not this far in the middle of nowhere. The bard set the mead on the table in front of Captain, so sweet he could taste it in his nose. A few moments later, a serving girl came around with a bowl of stew. Captain's mouth began to water, and it was all he could do to not start licking his chops. There was meat in the stew. Rabbit, at a guess. He couldn't eat it. Not yet, not with so many around. The bard might have diffused the situation for the moment, but that would change if they saw what exactly was in their midst. My name is Matteo Amore, and you are? No one of consequence. Certainly no one of importance. Matteo gave a winning smile and leaned in conspiratorially. A musician and a canid walk into a bar.
The beginning of a bad joke. But what is the punchline, I wonder?
Captain's eyes darted side to side, but no one paid them any heed. He resettled on Matteo, fingers itching with the need to hold a weapon, but he forced them to be still.
I don't want trouble, but I will make it if I have to. I am a bard, friend. Trouble is what we do. That said, I have no quarrel with you. If you want to go on up to your bed and be on your way, you can. But I think we have a common interest here.
Every instinct in Captain's body told him to take the food and run. The bed was foregone. The presence of a true bard, especially one with an interest in him, complicated those matters far too much to make staying here safe. He could take his chances out on the road, dig into a snowbank for the night. That's what he should have done. But a small voice in the forefront of his mind told him to stay, to wait and see. So Captain stayed put. Matteo glanced between Captain and the untouched food.
Ah, I see. Perhaps we should take our conversation somewhere more private. Your room, then.
What about your patrons? Matteo let out a soft whistle and snapped his fingers. 3 images of himself appeared on the stage, wielding a lute, a flute, and a small drum. As one, they struck up a lively tune, and the tavern began to dance.
I think my patrons will be satisfied for quite a while. Don't you worry.
Matteo slid easily from his chair and wandered toward the stairs, drinks appearing in his hand as easily as if he'd conjured them. Captain looked at the bowl of stew in front of him. He could take it and run. No one would ever be the wiser. It warmed his hands through the gloves as he followed Matteo up the stairs and into the last room on the right. Captain shut the door and turned the key in the lock. The huge sword slipped from its sheath and into his hand in a smooth motion as he turned to Matteo, still holding the stew. The bard's eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise, and he raised his hands dramatically.
Are you a Nothian? How long have you been haunting me? Hardly. Turin has the prettier princess at any rate. I'm not here for you.
The sword did not dip or sway as Captain set the bowl of stew down on a small table and pulled the wrappings from his face. Small clumps of partially melted snow hit the floorboards, seeping between the cracks. Matteo gave a handsome smile.
As much as I would enjoy a duel, I think there are efforts that would be better suited to 2 of our talents. Wouldn't you say, Capitan? How do you know me? Come now. Did you really think word of a secret canid hit squad amongst the Turin military would stay secret? I'd be a poor excuse for a bard if I hadn't heard of you. In Turin, they insist you don't exist. In Lenothia, they threaten excommunication to any who even suggest you killed General Fulvin. 2 pretty strong indications you were real. But how did you know that I'm Captain? You are not the first canid I've met, you know. But you're the only one I've seen without a master. There's only one canid I know of who can say the same, and only one who would have a healthy paranoia for the Nothian assassins. That, combined with the big sword you carry, would give you away to anyone who keeps an ear open to the heartbeat of society. Now, shall we eat in peace, or do you intend to run me through?
Captain's shoulders slumped. If word had gotten out about him, traveling would be even more difficult. He'd yet to learn the name of the kingdom he resided in, but it was neither Turin nor Lenothia. That much was evident. He was somewhere east and north, but there were few that would speak with him before perceiving him to be some kind of monster. He set the sword against the wall and started pulling the heavy clothes away. More snow fell to the ground in great heaps. What stayed behind soaked Captain's fur, leaving a wet dog scent that even overpowered the meat stew. Finally comfortable, he sat down at the table and began to eat.
You know me. You singled me out. What do you want from me? Some assistance, if you can spare it. I don't play. Easily remedied, but know what I mean. There is legitimate reason, beyond a poor harvest, that this village is wary. People have been going missing at a steady rate for months. One was found 3 weeks ago, torn to a bloody pulp. Most they don't find. I'm not a monster hunter. No, but my own investigation has hit a wall, and I need help. What's your stake in this? A friend of mine lived here. I've not heard from him in quite some time. As it turns out, he was one of the first to go missing.
There was risk. Mateo could be lying, could be leading him into a trap, or could be completely genuine and lead him toward a monster. The longer he stayed in town, the more he risked with the locals as well. When men looked for monsters, they found them everywhere. The presumption of innocence was a luxury reserved for those who did not know fear, and the burden of proof was a luxury reserved for those who did not look like Captain.
Your friend, he said. A better rival, much the same. He kept me on top of my game and I him. 4 months ago, he stopped responding to my letters. I sent magical correspondence, but that too was ignored. I came here to find him.
Captain eyed the bard again, looking at him more closely. The clothes were fashionable, but completely out of place with a backwoods mountain village like this. They weren't cheap imitations, either, as he had initially suspected. Mateo held himself with all the grace and edge of a trained courtier, with enough glinting wit to unbalance an entire court. You look like you've had some success in your ventures. Why would your rival be in this village? Why here?
I've spent the last week trying to figure out that very answer. Every lead has led me here, but I have yet to find a reason. Hector was a brilliant wordsmith. His talents fine enough to earn him place among any Fey gathering. Such clever machinations of mentions are lost on these people for whom education is an afterthought behind menial labors and crippling taxes.
You're a bard. Someone has to know something.
Exactly. But not even my powers of persuasion have turned the tongue to my cause. If the people here know something, they won't say. All I find is superstition.
What kind of superstition? Mateo chuckled and gave his meat a swirl. With one hand, he gestured toward the window, where the shining light of the full moon reflected off the snow.
Wolves in the night.
Captain felt his hackles rise. They suspect a lichen?
Among various other nighttime mountain abominations, yes. Lycanthropy is ridiculously rare, though. The chances of there being a full-blooded werewolf in these parts is laughable. Most likely they just saw a big wolf, and now the air runs wet with rumor.
Captain cursed aloud and stood from his chair. He reached for the winter wrappings, now soaked with melted snow, and started the laborious task of binding himself with them.
What in the hells has gotten into you?
These people are witch-hunting for a lichen, and a freed Canaan just walked into their tavern. I'm not waiting to be strung up from the nearest tree.
Come now. Surely a big fellow like you would be able to handle a few unruly villagers.
Until they come with pitchforks and flames. When they find the fire doesn't so much as curl my fur, that's when the talk of hells and devils comes out. I don't want this village's blood on my hands.
Then help me find out what's really going on here. If we put a stop to it, we'll be heroes. How would it feel to be welcomed in a place like this for once, instead of shunned? How would it feel to save someone?
Captain froze, wet fabric wrapping half his face. A guilty memory rose to the forefront of his mind, and the faces of 4 Canids swam in front of him. He blinked them away with a growl and let the wet wrappings fall to the floor. What did you have in mind?
It seems most of the people have gone missing from the forest surrounding the village, usually taken at night. We shall be 2 such individuals. Lacking the convenience of being attacked outright, perhaps you can pick up the trail.
A lot of trouble you're going through, for a rival.
I am a bard, Capitan. My whole life I've sung the tales of valiant heroes. Tonight, we have the opportunity to make others sing of what we do. Let us not disappoint them.
Just so long as they don't sing it in a minor key.
A hound of culture, I see. Let's not keep the singers waiting, then.
Mateo gave a short, trilling whistle, and a cloud of steam puffed from Captain's discarded wrappings. The moisture dissipated into the air, leaving the fabric warm and dry. Another short whistle and a heavy cloak appeared around the bard's shoulders. Captain tried not to be envious as he affixed the wrappings in place, knowing that it would be only a few short minutes before he'd be cold, wet, and covered in snow again. Who knew how many hours they would have to spend out in the cold, luring some creature of the night? He hadn't even been able to feel the lumpy comfort of the bed, his first opportunity in weeks. The triple projection of Matteo was still performing on stage when the unlikely duo made their way downstairs. The song had slowed from a jaunty tune to a slow ballad, with the lead Matteo singing in a pretty, flowing language.
Is that Elvish? Sylvan, actually. An old lullaby taught to me by a fey maiden I met some years ago. I hope you fight as well as you sing. Not to worry. You'll find my bite is even better than my bark.
For the first time in memory, Captain was able to cross a crowded room and reach the far door without being stopped or harassed. Matteo had separated from him halfway through, moving to collect what silver and copper had been placed into an upturned, foppish hat by appreciative drunks. The magical copies never flickered or wavered, as Captain knew some illusions were wont to do, a testament to the bard's skill. The wind had picked up in the half-hour he'd been inside. It fluttered his fabrics, biting at Captain's face and eyes. His fur was strong protection against the gnawing cold, but the weather was ever persistent and keen to make him submit. The short time away from it was enough to make it vengeful. Matteo appeared next to him a moment later, hood high and face covered.
A bit warm out, isn't it? Almost makes one want to go for a swim.
All Captain could think of was how cold and miserable he would be by the time the sun came up. His thick fur took hours to dry on the best of days, and, with that time denied him thanks to this reckless quest, there was little doubt a funk would follow him until he could bathe it away properly. Matteo, blind to his sacrifices, gestured toward the woods.
That way. A path runs from the village to an old logging camp. It's as good a place as any.
Captain gave the tavern one last forlorn glance. A small orange glow caught his eye, and he saw an overturned brazier sputtering against the snow and wind without another soul in sight. The two guards there had either abandoned their post or been forced to leave. Either was likely, but it twisted a knot into his stomach. Matteo stomped away toward the forest, either blind to the dangers or overconfident to his own safety. Captain tugged at the strap across his chest, shifting the weight of the massive blade on his back. If it was truly a lichen they faced, the sword was nothing but dead weight. But if it was anything else, they had a chance. The wind shifted, blowing a skirt of fresh snow across the covered paths between buildings. Fresh scent caught into Captain's snout. He spun, his sword appearing in his hand with the sheen of drawn steel. Matteo, drawn by the noise, produced a rapier and spun as well. Empty village space greeted them.
Jumping at shadows. We're not even to the woods yet. Quiet.
Captain took a hesitant step forward. There was no mistaking the scent, but it was hard to tell where it was coming from with the wind whipping around them. A snowbank rose against a building to his left, seemingly innocuous. Captain used his blade to wipe it away, and revealed a mass of blood and clothing beneath it.
I don't think we need to go to the forest. What the fuck? That's disgusting. There were a couple of guards when I entered the city. Looks like enough meat for two. But it's buried, not eaten. This was deliberate. Deliberate? You mean something did this? Left it behind? Purposefully? Why?
Captain knelt closer, examining the wounds in pulp. It was violent and quick, but not especially careful. It was animalistic, claws and fangs, but the wind had covered any tracks. Beneath the scent of blood and flesh was something canine.
It just doesn't make sense. Why kill two guards and reduce them to piles of meat if you're not going to eat it? It's a wild monster, no? No. No? It's a monster, but it's not wild. Not entirely. It killed the guards so they couldn't raise an alarm.
And if the guards weren't our focus, what? Captain sniffed deeply. Multiple scents mingled together, difficult to separate.
To create an opening for their real target.
Eh? More than one? Captain turned toward the tavern. The orange lights inside flickered, and a hint of music could still be heard over the whipping wind. Mateo followed his gaze. Have the villages in there?
A lot of fresh meat. Enough to fill an entire pack. Or create a new one.
Mateo gave Captain a withering look.
Don't tell me you think it's lichens too. Bad enough to deal with that superstitious nonsense from the know-nothings.
A howl split the night, deep and mournful. A second joined it, then more. 5 cries lifted to the moon, discordant and full of pain. Despite the cold and cloth, Captain's hackles rose. There was something deeply wrong with the howls. Emotive, primal, but wrong. Then the howls dissipated, until all that could be heard was the whipping wind and the gentle play of music from Mateo's illusory triplets.
Perhaps I was a tad hasty with my dismissal.
Captain caught movement between 2 nearby buildings, a shadow against shadows. Another dark spot flitted from one rooftop to another. The clouds parted, and a sliver of moonlight shone through, reflecting off the snow like a silver sun.
Get to the tavern. Get the crowd under control.
What are you going to do?
The only thing I'm good for.
Captain pulled the wrappings from his face and removed his heavy cloak, dropping both into the powdery snow. Mateo took off running for the tavern, rapier banging against his hip. Captain unsheathed the mighty blade across his back and sank it into the snow. The careful edge would be useless in what was to come. He could smell them now. All 5, carrying the scent of men and wolves, of death and blood. They surrounded him, creeping forward out of the shadows. Huge, bent things covered in brown fur. They were wolves and they were men, both and neither. Their yellow eyes met Captain's, identical in all but intent, and their fangs dripped with their hunger and their confusion. No doubt they were taking in his scent, trying to understand him. They would see him for what he was, a distant cousin, but they wouldn't know what it meant. If he would be pack or prey. Captain let the rest of his bindings fall to the snow, retaining only his trousers and boots. Globs of ice and snow clung to his matted fur, as it did to the fur of the 5 around him. One gave a low snarl, a challenge. Captain turned to it, but didn't respond. Canids had been hunted to near extinction and enslaved for more generations than they could count. But each pack held an oral history passed down to every new litter, whispered word by whispered word, in a language only they knew. Stories of dark experiments under the full moon. Canids who had been turned rabid, robbed of sense and reason. Men who had given themselves to rage and power. Lichens. Werewolves. The union of Canid and man. The sum of their worst parts to create something more powerful than either. A fairy tale among humans, but a very real history for the Canids. It took a powerful curse to create a true lichen, though a lesser beast could be made with wolves. Still dangerous, still powerful, but not at the pinnacle of its potential. The lichen slunk closer to Captain, still unsure how to place him in the creature's narrow worldview. Pack or prey? The two were not exclusive. Captain uncurled his fists, feeling the strength in his fingers. To fight one lichen was a Sisyphean task. To fight 5 was suicide. Perhaps it was his time, his way. He'd been searching for a purpose for months, searching for why the world needed Captain. Perhaps this was it. To die in this time and place, for this reason, against a ghost of his people. The thought was almost a relief. The lichen lunged for Captain, fangs bared, claws outstretched. Captain ducked the attack on his throat and bludgeoned the werewolf's ribs with his fist. It felt like punching a tree, but the lichen gave a light cough and took a step back, surprised. Captain pressed the attack. He doubted the lichen had ever felt pain before, at least in this form, and had to move quickly if he wanted to capitalize on its distraction. Captain's claws dragged along its fur, but its skin was too strong to break. His fists collided with face and body, but, after the creature's initial surprise wore off, there was almost no effect. The back of the creature's hand struck Captain's chest and the world lurched away. Wind flapped against his ears. Then he was surrounded by broken glass and frightened people. The tavern ceiling stared back at him. Then Mateo's face came into view.
Good show, but it's my turn to take the stage.
The patrons had crowded into the narrow upstairs hall, standing on each other's feet on the stairwell, packed together like fish, fresh for a wolf's dinner. Captain grunted and lifted himself to his feet. Some of the closer patrons got a look at him and screamed, pressing back. Mateo lifted his hands dramatically, and his doubles multiplied again, turning into 5 different Mateos, each holding either a violin or a drum.
Let's start the main event!
The drums tattooed a beat inside of Captain's chest, louder than reason, louder than thought. It filled him with energy and vigor, made him want to jump back out the window and face them again, but there was no need. One of the lichens leaped through the open space, sending more shattered glass to the floor as another crashed into the front door. Mateo, the real Mateo, drew his sword and held it up like a conductor's baton. Bows met violins in a frenzy of strings, and the fight began. The lichens rushed Mateo, fury and strength and ravenous hunger. The wily bard slipped between them, drawing his sword along the legs and arms, but the small wounds the blade opened healed almost instantly. They whirled and chased him as he danced up onto the tables, keeping them at bay with well-timed thrusts that caused pain more than damage. Captain stumbled back, hitting the wall. The room spun before him. He needed something he could actually use against them, something that would hurt. His eyes fell on the half-orc bartender, Roger, crouching behind the bar, clutching the coin register. Roger bared his teeth in defiance but flinched away. Captain took a step forward and stumbled to the ground.
You're one of them! Get away from me!
I need your silver. And your sock. Mateo ducked a mess of claws and kicked a wooden plate into one lichen's face. Another lichen had entered through the open window and lunged for the band. It twisted and snarled among them, utterly confused as to why it couldn't touch any of the flesh it could see, but the magic needed more than anger and claws to break. Mateo whistled in time to the music. His voice split into 2 distinct tones, one high, one low. The wooden plate in his hand cracked apart, forming a circlet of twisted wood and thorns. Mateo somersaulted over the lichen as it lunged for his legs, placing the circlet down onto its head. It howled, clutching at its face as the barbs wormed into skin, then caught sight of the 4th lichen coming through the doorway. The 2 fell upon each other and tumbled into the snow, punching, kicking, clawing, and biting with all the ferocity of wild beasts. Captain rose from the bar as the lichen scrabbled onto it, bearing down on him with all fours. His fist cracked into its cheek, then he swung with the loaded sock. Change rattled, but the lichen recoiled from the strike, skin sizzling. Captain vaulted over the bar and swung again, battering the lichen across the face and chest, each strike leaving hissing red welts and puckering boils that refused to heal. The werewolf fell over a chair, and Captain brought the sock down again and again until it stopped moving. Something tackled him from the side, sending them both through a thick table. Claws tore into Captain's chest, and he snarled with pain. The lichen had lost interest in the band and found him to be more entertaining. Captain bucked his hips, throwing the lichen over his head and into the wall. He turned and swung with the sock, but it burst apart, sending silver coins scattering across the floor. The lichen twisted over, snarling, and lunged for him again. Captain grabbed a handful of coins and slapped them into the lichen's mouth. It retched and gasped, but a punch to the throat made it swallow. The werewolf fell to the floor and curled in on itself, moaning. A hand grabbed Captain's arm and hauled him to his feet.
There, that wasn't so bad, was it?
That's only 4. Where's the 5th?
A screeching, eye-watering scream pierced the night. The body of people pressed into the stairwell and hallway beyond surged forward into the room. Captain and Mateo shared a glance, then ran forward, pressing their way through the crowd. The final lichen had circled to the back of the tavern and entered through the second-story window. Amid the broken glass, it held the bloodied torso of a woman in its grasp. The rest of her was in pieces on the floor. Blood wetted the fur of its mouth, dripped down to the wood as it stared triumphantly at Captain and Mateo. A mad cry burst forth from Mateo, so loud Captain had to clap his hands over his ears. The air in front of him shimmered, waves radiating outward from the sustained note. Wood splintered, glass turned into sand, and the lichen was thrown back out the window. The whole end of the hallway shattered outward, crushed beneath the concussive noise. Captain lowered his hands and threw a sidelong look at Mateo.
Was all that really necessary?
Occupational entitlement. Come on, it won't be dead.
The bar jumped through the splintered hole and landed in a snowbank below. Captain followed a moment later. The lichen had gotten to its feet, snuffling as if getting its bearings, then turned toward the two of them. Captain brought his fists up, ready to fight, but the wolf's gaze switched to something over his shoulder. Then it turned and disappeared into the forest. Mateo took a step after it, but it was already gone.
Damn. We'll never catch it now.
Captain turned, hoping to find what the lichen had run from, and saw a purple glow in the sky far to the east. Dawn was approaching. The fight was over. They had survived. Captain stretched his back and shivered. Snow clung to his fur, making him slow and heavy. Without a word, he walked to the front of the inn and retrieved his cloak, wrappings, and sword. The lichens that had fought each other had spread evidence of their bloody fight all over the snow, but neither was present. Captain's wrappings would be useless until he could get dry, but the cloak would help a little. He pulled it on as the first few villagers left the tavern.
Monster! Another one!
A rock thudded against the wall next to him. Captain turned toward the people, staring at them for a long moment. A few froze under the weight of his glare, but others reared back their fists, holding more stones and sharper things.
Wait, you fools! He saved you!
Mateo placed himself between Captain and the crowd, arms spread wide as though trying to scare away a larger predator.
Capitan fought a pack of werewolves single-handedly, while you all cowered away in your rooms. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
He probably led the pack to us.
The half-orc bartender hobbled his way out into the snow, one big green foot exposed.
He stole my money and my sock.
And gave you back your life, you blithering idiot.
The bartender flinched and fell back. Mateo waved a hand and muttered a strange word. Blue sparks flashed around the half-orc's head before disappearing.
Shit, overdid it there. Listen, the only reason you're all alive is because of that canid right there.
Get out, the both of you. We don't need you around here.
Captain turned and left, trudging away to the west. Mateo stared open-mouthed at the villagers, then turned to follow.
I don't believe it. Why wouldn't they just listen to reason? That werewolf is still out there.
People see what they want to see.
And you? Why didn't you stand up for yourself?
Tell me one thing I could have said that would have changed their minds. You're one of them, and they ignored you. To people like that, I will never be anything more than another monster.
Guns, how do you stand it?
I don't.
What you need is a rebranding. A bit of marketing to help sell you to the people of these lands. Your tale is already one that makes for a great tragic hero. We just need to spruce it up a bit. Tell me, do you like your meter iambic or trochaic?
No.
You trust my judgment in the matter. Very wise of you. Not to worry, my furry friend. We'll have the villages singing your praises by next year's end. By the way, where are we going?
There were 5 lichens. 3 remain. I'm going after them.
Wait, what? You're still going after the werewolves?
A pack of lichens can destabilize the entire region. Wintergreen isn't the only village in these mountains. Many more will die if nothing is done.
I can see it now. The tireless hero fighting through the night, hunting through the day, constantly dogging that which threatens civilization. They will love you.
Enough. If you want to come, keep moving.
Of course I'm coming. I still haven't found my friend. So, what's the plan?
Find them and put an end to this. One way or the other.
And how exactly do you intend to solve the issue that they are practically immune to our weapons?
You're a busker. Got any silver?
A busker? A busker? Was that a street corner I performed on? Did you see an open case?
I saw an upturned hat.
That's completely different.
Silver, Mateo.
Oh, fine. Here. I hope you're not expecting me to finance all our adventures.
All?
What? Do you have more pressing matters?
We'll see.
Well, that's hurtful. But no matter. Come. Adventure awaits.
The bard led the way along the trail of blood, one hand resting against the hilt of his rapier to keep it from banging against his hip, the other holding on to his large feathered hat so it wouldn't blow off his head. Captain followed along, binding the silver coins into the wrappings around his hands. The sun had fully emerged from the horizon, birthing a new cold day. Captain had survived the night, his daily surprise. There had been no sleep, no rest, but that was a blessing these days. Sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought memories, ones better forgotten. The trail of blood widened, giving way to more viscera. Captain quickened his pace, walking sidelong Mateo. It was good to have a purpose again, even if it was ridiculous. He had something to point himself toward, a vector to pursue. Perhaps the good he could do here would help offset the gnawing emptiness in his chest, or perhaps the effort would kill him and save him the trouble. He flexed his knuckles against the wrappings, feeling the hard, lumpy shape of coins press against his fur.
Capitan?
I see it.
Ahead of them, 3 lichens had collapsed amid the trees, barely shaded against the morning light. 2 of the 3 roiled and howled, their flesh bubbling like a stew pot. Swaths of furry flesh fell away in glopping heaps to settle into the snow, revealing wet, bloody skin beneath like that of a newborn. They writhed along the ground, tearing at themselves with long, clawed fingers. The last stood above them, hunched and snarling, but showed no signs of discomfort. After a loud, uncomfortable minute, 2 humans, a man and a woman, laid panting in the snow, seemingly unaware of the bite of cold against their bared skin. The lichen above them snarled, but they showed no fear. Mateo drew his blade with a rasp of metal, gaining the attention of all 3.
Time for the curtain call. Let's take a bow, Capitan.
The bard stepped forward with a flourish of his sword. 2 identical copies appeared next to him, each wielding blades of their own. The 2 humans scrambled to their feet, teeth bared and arms wide, as though they were still wolves. Mateo circled to the side, and they charged him, cries as feral as their eyes. The lichen turned to Captain, looking at him with that same expression of confusion, uncertain what to make of him. Friend or foe, pack or prey. Captain gave the straps around his fists a final tightening tug and squared up, heart thumping painfully in his chest. The lichen snorted, a violent exhalation of breath, and jumped at him with all the speed of a striking snake. Captain ducked, more instinct than thought, and the lichen's snapping jaws found only the split ends of Captain's fur. He responded with an uppercut, planting his fist into the werewolf's stomach. The hot stench of burning flesh filled the air, and the lichen growled. Captain sidestepped around a swipe of claws and hit the lichen in the jaw, momentarily stunning it. Nearby, the Mateo triplicates danced around the 2 humans, swords flashing, spilling bright red blood against the snow. The wounds closed quickly, but slower each time. One caught a Matteo by the throat, and the illusion melted away. Another dug their fist into the bard's heart, and that illusion melted away as well, leaving only the original, now outnumbered. Captain caught a backhand to the jaw, knocking him off his feet. A tree intercepted him and sent him spinning into a snowdrift. Pain flashed across his face and back. A snarl tore its way from his mouth, loud and threatening. Each of the lichens turned toward him as he pushed himself off the ground. The one still in wolf form, the pack leader, let loose a baleful howl, and the two followers let loose cries of their own, high-pitched and anguished. The cloth around Captain's fists fell into the snow, torn and bloody. Captain's knuckles dripped with blood, torn from the sharp bits of metal. It wouldn't be much help, but he drew his sword anyway and held the massive blade out, marking his challenge.
Capitan, switch with me.
Matteo's rapier pierced the back of the pack leader's knee, making it buckle and howl. Captain switched his attention to the two others, who ran at him with fury etched deep into their faces. Matteo let out a loud cry, then, somehow, added a second voice to the note, turning the note minor and discordant. Captain's greatsword wisped in blue light for a moment. He swung it in a large circle, forcing both lichens back. The man caught the sword in his forearm, and the blade cut through, severing the limb below the elbow. The woman tried to jump on the captain's back as he turned, but Captain sidestepped and brought the sword around, cleaving through her torso from hip to shoulder. She landed in two pieces against the snow, hands and feet twitching. Matteo's rapier blurred as he brought it to bear against the pack leader. Steel rang against claw, sound dampened by snow. A claw clutched for his throat, quickly withdrawn after biting blade severed 3 furry fingers. The pack leader stumbled back, clutching at their hand. Captain spun, keeping his huge sword in motion as the human lichen dove, howling for his throat. The blade buried itself in the lichen's skull, slinging his body to the side as Captain turned with the strike. Panting from the effort, he faced the pack leader. The lichen's flesh bubbled as it clutched its hand. The burning wrath of its yellow eyes gave way to an all-too-human hate in green. Patches of fur and flesh fell away in mounds, revealing the man beneath. In moments, all that remained of the wolf was the mess of flesh, and shivering amongst the cold was a young man with autumn hair, green eyes, and not a stitch in sight. The 3 severed fingers of his right hand had regrown. Matteo, who stood with rapier poised to deliver the final blow, hesitated.
Hector?
The man twisted and glared at Matteo, but his eyes kept jumping back to Captain.
You shouldn't have come, Matteo. I shouldn't have come. What the fuck were you doing here?
Are ye, Captain? Captain took a step to the side, angling himself toward both Matteo and the lichen. His back throbbed painfully.
What is this? A trap?
Matteo sheathed his sword and placed a hand over his heart.
Everything I have told you about my intentions is the truth. You're a bard. The truth is water in your hands. Capitan, please. I am part of no trap. I came here to find Hector. That is all. You are, Captain, the free Canid. Finally. I'd hoped to find you. What happened to you, Hector? It's pretty clear what happened to him. He turned himself into a lichen, but he lacked the key ingredient.
Matteo took a hesitant step away, disgust crawling along his face.
You are searching for Canids. The people of these lands have long told of the legends of the Wolfmen. Wintergreen especially has had tales of lycanthropes going back the last 200 years. I spent months here, researching, learning, preparing. I thought, perhaps, a wild Canid pack lived in the woods, but I was wrong. The last Canid was killed 4 generations ago. All that time wasted. You're not making any sense, Hector. The flesh of man is weak, Matteo. It breaks under the stress of true power. It must be cold to give way to something better. You had mail rot, didn't you?
Treatments they offered me. A delay, never a cure. I knew what had to be done, what I would need to become to survive. I didn't expect it to be so intoxicating. I sacrificed a wolf pack under the full moon, covered myself in their pelts, and became as one with them. They give me strength, but they are nothing compared to the power of a canid. With you, Captain, I will become a true werewolf. One who never has to relinquish the power of their stronger form.
The guards. Your pack. Gods, Hector. How many people did you kill in your mad pursuit for power?
I killed those not strong enough to join me. Don't make their mistake, Mateo. You can spend your life groveling at the feet of the elite, or you can make them bend to you. Are you the lapdog nipping at their heels for scraps? Or are you the thing that howls in the night, forcing them to bar their doors and cower in fear?
Fear was never the goal, Hector. Nor power. You forgot that.
Forgot? No, you've forgotten what it was like to be nothing. I will not be nothing again. With the power of a canid, I will become more than you can imagine. The full moon will instill the power of legends within me. I can almost taste it.
Hector took a stumbling step toward Captain. Mania dripped from his eyes as his flesh roiled, sprouting heavy fur. The leather grip of Captain's greatsword squeaked beneath his hands. At the end of the day, it was another human come to take from him his people. There was no end to it. Subjugation and broken will were not enough. Humanity would drain every last vestige of power and slaughter the Canids when they were no longer useful. Pain seized Captain. His back was wet and weak. His hands ached and bled. Weariness was a shackle around his limbs, and it was all he could do to stay standing. It always boiled down to humans in the end. Fighting them, saving them, killing them. It never made a difference. Captain had followed a human's orders his entire life, right up until he was given freedom. But freedom had been another cage. The world was a big place, made all the bigger without an idea of what to do. There was no mission, no cause, no authority. There was nothing for him, just as there had been nothing along the whole long road to get there. Perhaps it was finally time to die. Hector's mouth swelled, pushing out from his skull. Fangs ripped through gums with splatters of blood. At any moment, the lichen would complete his transformation and there would be no stopping him. Not from Captain. A blade grew from Hector's mouth, red and bloody. It moved to the side, parting flesh and sinew with a spray, as Hector's head fell the other way. The lichen wobbled for a moment, then fell to the snow. The fur boiled away and revealed the corpse of a man beneath. Captain stared at it for a long moment, then brought his eyes up to Mateo, still holding a bloody rapier.
Rest in peace, old friend. I will remember you.
Captain's leg buckled and he fell into the snow. The cold had settled in his marrow. Something rubbed out of his back. A branch, embedded and broken when he hit the tree. A cough forced its way out of his throat, wet and painful.
I didn't kill my oldest friend for you to die anyway.
A hand grabbed Captain's shoulder. The other gripped the branch and pulled it free. Heat poured into him, encouraging the skin to knit itself back together. Captain let out a low, whining keen. It was all he could manage. The pain faded. Captain opened his eyes and saw Mateo standing above him, silhouetted by the sun, one hand extended. Captain took the hand and let the bard pull him up, which wasn't without some difficulty.
You're heavier than you look, you know. I'm not dead.
He had fought 5 lichens without sleep or suitable weapons, and he had survived.
Nor me. I don't know about you, but I think I've had enough of the cold. What say we go somewhere warmer?
And do what?
If this is what happens after just a couple hours of us being together, I can only imagine the depths of mischief we'll get up to. Think about it. The marvelous misadventures of Matteo and Capitan.
Sounds like the beginning of a bad ballad.
Perhaps if you are singing, once I make it famous, you might be able to sleep in an inn without burning it down first. What say you?
I can live with that.